Oh yeah, you hear that air horn? Is is
That's
about?
quite a transition, dude.
Oh, I know. I was worried that the music of that, hadn't figured out how to change it yet. So it's very, chill.
It feels
And
almost like religious chill music, though. You know,
I
that
know
organ kind of feel to it.
it does, but I don't like. I got my buttons here in case we need them. Oh yeah, it's time for graphs about religion and politics with spicy banter.
That was too good, dude. You hit the post perfect.
Oh well, I've been practicing. It entertains me, and there's a few of the homebrewed community people that are really concerned that I don't take things seriously enough, and I don't listen. That's I'm like, look, I read like 2 books a week, do an interview, a class, a live stream, and if I was down and dreary all the time, I wouldn't want to do it. But because you know what, sometimes talking about religion makes you want to do rock like that. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You're like Fred on the Howard Stern show, dude, just with the drops in the back. That's your new job.
Yeah, well, I have a whole separate sound pad that are all Lord of the Rings sounds. But we're not using that today. Instead
You're
of
like
the air horn
in the back. Put your helmet on, your robot helmet on, and start like hitting the buttons and dancing around and stuff. That's trip.
Instead of the air horns, it's the horn of Gondor. And only a few people would recognize it, but I'm like, yeah. Look, Kyle's already on here. We barely hit the live button. He must be a super fan, Kyle Sanders, right?
I love Kyle Sanders. You're my favorite, Kyle. Thank you.
Well, you know what we should tell Kyle?
Dude,
I'm trying to help you out right here. Come on, Ryan. What are we supposed to tell him?
I got a Substack.
Boom!
I got a
Substack.
Substack, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Graphs
aboutreligion.com. Go right there right now.
Aboutreligion.com. And what happens on this Substack?
I post graphs about religion. That's what I do, because that's what I always do. I write some words that probably have a lot of typos and crap in them, because I don't proofread it, because who needs that? But I put like 3-4 graphs, some thoughts. I got a paid tier, but I'm not even using it right yet, because I want to build up a nice base before I actually do like paid posts. But you better believe it's growing quickly, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback. So
you're almost to double digits, right?
I'm almost a double digits on paid subscribers. Thank you, all the paid subscribers.
Yeah.
It's only been 10 days, so I'm really stoked about that. I got a domain. I bought a logo. I'm really kind of leaning in, and screw Elon Musk and Twitter.
Yeah.
They suck. Substack where it's at.
Look, look, we hung out when you came to speak at Wake Forest University. We had ourselves a good time, and actually a really good time. I was surprised. Like I knew I liked you, but I didn't know that you were like A+ hang.
We had a great hang. 10 out of 10 hang.
Because some of Tony's friends, Tony Jones' friends, when I meet them, I'm like, I can see why they're friends, and we'll stay acquaintances. But that I'm like, oh, I like Ryan. I want to hang out with Ryan, and I want everyone to know that loves these episodes. Probably Kyle is one of them. They're like, wait, can you need to get Ryan to come to Theology Beer Camp, and so I'm already starting the witnessing.
Listen, I don't know much about theology, but I know a little bit about beer.
Yeah, I know. I'm not
camping.
Gonna. Well, it's not. You're not actually camping.
Oh, thank God.
But yes, it originally started that way. The event was too big to actually camp, but I kept the name. So.
What, you actually camped your first year?
No, I wanted to camp because I thought only 15 people would sign up, but then like 100 and some did, and I'm like, I'm not camping with 100 and some day drinking theology nerds. So
peeing behind trees everywhere, dude.
Yeah, I'm like, can we? Then you are tasked with finding a church that lets you day drink in the sanctuary. But
that seems not easy to find.
You want to know how many of the ones I've done it at are Baptist?
Exactly.
Zero. But if any of them want to break it, just it's now. Look, would you have guessed that Rick Warren would get kicked out of the Southern Baptist Convention? No?
Yeah, because he likes women pastors. What a crazy thought, right?
I know, and if you can ordain women, even though your tribe's like it's definitely not in the Bible, despite the fact it is. Well, considering the amount of beer references in the Bible, then I feel like it's biblical. So you have not completed the whole biblical church until it happens.
I think Rick Warren throws a couple back. Don't you feel like he probably drinks a little bit on the weekends?
Oh, dude, let me tell you about Southern California evangelicals. They're like much more chill than the ones I grew up with in the South. They're like, yeah, I mean, we're conservative-ish. That's
what's that old meme about Baptists? If you're going to go on a fishing trip and you want to split your beer, bring one Baptist. If you want to keep all your beer, you bring two Baptists.
Yeah.
That's exactly how they work, dude.
Yep. And if you want to have a lot of fun, you bring the Episcopalian because they'll be flasking it.
Did I ever tell you my first ever time I drank alcohol was in an Episcopal church?
I'm not surprised that they serve it for Jesus every Sunday.
I grew up Southern Baptist, right? Like super conservative, rural America. We take this trip to Chicago for Greenville in college, undergrad. And we had to go to a bunch of different religious sites, right? So we went to a Catholic church, went to a Muslim, a mosque, we went to a synagogue, went to all these places. First place we went was an Episcopal church in downtown Chicago. I was served communion by a female, which I was Southern Baptist, so, like, woo, strike against you right there.
Yeah, watch out.
Yeah, secondly, she was a lesbian, open lesbian. And this is like in 2001.
This is before Barack Obama evolved.
Before Barack, way in the dark ages. You know what I mean?
His church had evolved, but where he attends. Exactly. He personally hasn't until after he was president.
Until Biden made him evolve, which is funny. Can you imagine Biden like dragging you to the left? That just makes me laugh.
Yes, I cannot imagine that, if that's what you were wondering.
Well, that one issue he did. So one strike, she's woman. Second strike, she's lesbian. Third strike, she gave me actual alcohol. And I was like, I can never tell my Southern Baptist grandmother this happened, or she would run me out of the house.
Yeah. You want to, okay. I want to say two things, and we'll actually, we got 5 awesome charts about religion and politics with some, but this is more the opening spicy banter as people that are live streaming share it and tell their friends, and then they get their reminders, But I was talking with John Dominic Crossan the other day, and someone sent in this question, was like, what is one of the translation issues that drives Dom nuts? And when he's looking, and so apparently in the NRSV translation, I don't know what the phrase is in Hebrew, but it regularly gets used as a translated strong drink. And they're all positive statements, like, oh, unless you're a king and you're in war, you shouldn't have strong drink. Well, it turns out like it actually is just beer. That's what they're talking about, is beer. And he's like, why won't the NRSV put beer in there? It's lower in alcohol than strong drink and more delicious, and I'm like, I've never wanted to advocate for biblical literalism like this in years. And if it was in there, maybe a Baptist church would host theology beer camp.
No strong drink, only beer.
Only beer.
Why don't you do strong drink camp? Oh, that didn't have the same kind of ring to it.
Yeah, day 3 at strong drink camp is very different than beer camp.
You're not surviving. You're not getting to day 3 at strong drink camp, dude. Yeah. It's a day and a half if you're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're good at strong drink camp, then you have other issues,
You upgrade. So you do like levels, like tiers.
Tiers.
Right? Like, so like beer camp's like the basic level, right? And then you go, if you graduate from that, you get to strong drink camp next year. So that's a smaller cadre. And you can actually camp. Go back to the tents, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what you want to camp with. The 15 people that are like, liquor for 3 days straight while we talk about God. And anyway, the other thing is you I feel like you were just trying to endear yourself to me. Like you went on strike.
I did.
I know.
6
I have
days,
never
guys. 6 days.
Yes. You know how many Bernie Bro points you earned in your 6 days of strike? It's going to ruin your reputation. They're going to say, this is what happens when you start hanging out with Tripp.
Comrade, I walked the picket line. I walked 8 miles a day for 2 days. And we actually got closer to what we wanted. We got a real crappy offer. Now, our offer's not great, but it's better than what it was. But the problem with us is with academia, actually your power goes down the longer you go on strike, especially in the spring semester, because at some point the administration can just pull the plug and go, semester's over, go home. and then we can't strike anymore because there's no students there. So we kind of waited too long, but we got a good offer, and I feel reasonably okay about it. Now I'll tell you what the crap part is, though. They're not giving us our strike pay. 6 days they're going to dock us on our paycheck, which sucks, and I'm mad about it. But I'll get over it, I guess.
You will. You know what? One of the ways, I'm just saying, if people are like, wow, Ryan Burge actually went on strike for 6 whole days, you show solidarity, they can go to grapsabout.religion.com and join.
That's what I did during the strike. That's what I did. I built my Substack. I was like, I got to find another way to make income while I'm sitting around losing money. So Substack it is. Here we go.
Well, there you go. There you go.
I'm a hustler. Trip, you're a hustler. I'm a hustler, dude. That's the way it works.
Well, I'm just excited for you. I just wanted all the people to know that you've been taking steps towards the kingdom of God. You know, you're so
Substack is the kingdom of God. Is that what we're saying right now?
No. Striking against the educational industrial complex and the exploitation of the actual educators, because they give so much money and attention to administrators and trying to lure 18-year-olds into making horrible decisions about their life, and then defunding and not investing in the actual formation of adults that you could have when you have time on campus with a community that's full of diversity, engaging the rich texts of tradition, the developing critical minds. You bring out citizens that can participate in the world more beautifully and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, no, let's just have more administrators, more paperwork, and spend all the money that we're making all these students take out in loans to add stuff to our campus. So an 18-year-old wants to go there, have parties, and play video games, as opposed to helping people become the most amazing contributors to their society, their congregations, their vocations, inspiring them to be, like a high quality human. Anyway, just
meanwhile, in state of Texas, they just passed a bill making it illegal for state universities to grant tenure to professors there.
Well, you know what that's going to do? It's really, really going to bring in the best professors in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm. Listen, it makes me happy as crap. I live in a blue state with a union shop, man. I'm sitting in the catbird seat right now. I can't go in. Plus, I got a good pension. I got good health insurance. I mean, I would never leave, Trip. Plus, I get to write my Substack and talk to you.
I know. And
that's
so
all I need.
Yeah, you're easy to find right at graphaboutreligion.com. All right. So we have 5 graphs today. And if people are new, you tweet graphs all the time. You also share them on your new Substack, and these are graphs about religion. Now, before you get in, what's the short version of where these graphs come from, and how you engage data to help us wrestle with these questions for the public square around religion and politics?
I don't know, dude. I just sit around and think about things, and I got. So the thing is, I know what data exists. Like, that's my killer advantage. I really know like what I can ask, the questions that are available to ask of me. And I just think of like, what about this thing with that thing? Like, has anyone ever thought about the relationship between gender and trust, or, age and education and church attendance, or whatever it is? So I've been an insanely curious guy my entire life. And grad school just gave me the tools to like answer questions that I had. And my whole thought is, why don't I just share that with other people? Because me making a graph and leaving it on my hard drive helps no one. Me making a graph and putting it on Twitter helps a lot of people, and I've heard tons of people say like, oh, I use your graphs in my teaching, like in college or high school. I'll put these graphs up and, on the board, we'll talk about them for a while. I'm like, that makes me more happy than anything else I do. Cause like I'm helping illuminate the world. And that sounds like so high-minded or whatever, but really, I love it, dude. Like, I help people understand the world in a better way just by posting stupid stuff on Twitter and Substack, graphaboutreligion.com. Because I'm showing people what's going on in the world. And I think that's the coolest thing I can do as an academic, is say, here's where you fit in the big picture. And I think that's kind of what my motivating principle really is.
Yeah. Well, I like your motivating principle, Ryan.
Thank you. Me too.
And I updated our little graph thingy here with a really sweet version of spicy. If you are like most people that will hear this on the podcast, you should at least go look at the logo that's at the front of the video, because this graph is great. Like, faith, hope, love, justice, democracy is writing on the bottom. Got it. But graphs about religion and politics with spicy banter.
Did you make this?
Yeah, spicy's on fire.
You are quite the entrepreneur, you know that? A man of all trades.
Wow, there's nothing like the power of Canva and being up late, a bit angry about the performance of the Lakers, to go to sleep. So you're like, what kind of cool things on here? And I found that spicy and was like, well, this is gonna be good. But all right, here we go. Here we go.
Oh gosh, I'm nervous. I don't even remember these, by the way. Oh, this is a good one.
Oh yeah, this is the shift in Republican affiliation between 2008 and 2022. Now the tweet, Ryan.
Yeah.
Was the whole narrative about white Christians turning to the GOP really needs to be narrowed down. It's really white Christians with low levels of education, lower levels of church attendance. Almost all the movement is the bottom 4 boxes on the left here.
Yeah. Yeah. This is something I think that when people don't do a good job in their mind of differentiating like what's happening with white Christianity in politics. They think like all these white Christians, they are more Republican than they were 15 years ago. And it's actually not, it's not the high attending, high education ones that are going towards the GOP. It's the biggest shift in like religion and politics right now is low education, low attendance white people shifting from being sort of 50-50 politically to being overwhelmingly in the Republican Party today. So now they're like 70% Republicans today when they were 50%, 15 years ago. The other group, the high attending, high education group, has always been like 70-75% Republicans, and they've really kind of hung out there. They've not gone up. And people are like, well, they had a ceiling. They couldn't go up any higher. Bull crap. You can still go up from 70%. Like 90% of atheists voted for Biden in 2020. There's room above 75%. Black Protestants, 95% voted for Obama in 2008. So they could have moved 10 points to the right, but they didn't. They stuck in that one spot around 70-75%. It's the low education, low income white Christians, or low education, low attendance white Christians that are going towards the GOP. And by the way, you know where most white Christians are in this graph? The bottom left corner, the one that's shifting from being a more, divided group to being a more Republican group. And that is really what shifted American politics over the last 15 years is it's the non-Christian Christians and the non-educated Christians that are going towards the GOP. It's not the high education, high income. The people you see on TV talking about evangelicalism and politics, those are not the ones making the moves and really changing things at the ballot box. It's the people who graduated high school and never go to church but identify with Christianity for a cultural reason. They're the ones that Trump won over in 2016 and 2020. And they're the ones that really the reason the GOP is where it is right now.
Mm-hmm. So when you're introducing all these different kind of sociological, cultural factors that you can get data on, in general, what are the habits if you look at the lower attendance and participation with a religious group and lower education? Are there particular features of that population that kind of consistently show up when you track it around other questions?
So very low political participation and like extra political participation. So things like going to like city council meetings, school board meetings, giving money to a candidate campaign, which obviously tracks with income because poor people don't have money just to throw around, obviously. But even things like putting up a political yard sign, the people in that low education and low participation group are the ones who don't do anything politically except vote, right? Like that's the bottom line, all they do. What we know, and we've known this for a long time, is political participation and religious participation are highly correlated with each other. The more you do one, the more you do and it's hard to figure out like which one is the first cause of all that. But it's like being more engaged in one part of society makes you more engaged in the other part of society. But the interesting thing about this group is they're not engaged in the religious part of their denomination or their belief system, but they're actually politically, they go to the ballot box and now switch to the GOP. So like, but they're not like putting up yard signs. They're not going to meetings. They're not really trying to do anything else except vote for Trump. So it's like that they're doing the bare minimum Republican stuff, which is vote for the GOP, but do nothing else on top of that, which in some ways, if you're a Democrat's good because they're not trying to like win school board elections and change the city council. Wow. But it's, like you got to find your victories when you can find them. But the downside is people who don't participate in the political process are very disconnected. They feel very angry and upset about the political process. And they feel like it's not very efficacious to them. And that's really what makes democracy crumble, is when you feel like the system doesn't work for you. And January 6th, right? Like, a lot of those people were saying, they're having a very normal day, obviously, on January 6th, by saying democracy doesn't work for us. This system is illegitimate. And what I worry about is that group that's on that bottom level, low education, low attendance, is growing, and they're growing disaffected with all the institutions of American society. And that really, to me, is like the first cracks of democracy falling apart, is when we lose institutional trust, and they're the ones who are losing it most quickly.
So there, I feel like you're getting at that group for a lot of factors, some of which you get in data, and some it probably varies based on the community or things that are harder to track. But there is, you would say, a correlation then between like lower civic participation, be it church, politics, or whatever, lower education, and the lower that is, the more likely they're going to be expressions of cultural resentment and anger in that population.
Absolutely. Social capital is like the glue that holds us together, right? It's the idea like, I care about the parks, even though I don't have kids that go to the park, or I care about the school, even though I don't have kids that are school age. And one type of participation builds these bridges, which leads to other bridges that you want to build, right? So like, being part of a church makes you more likely to run for city council, because people are like, hey, you'd be good, we'll vote for you. So if you cut the strings of all that stuff, what do you have left? You are kind of floating in social, cultural, political, religious space. And the other part, and I think the internet, by the way, has obviously accelerated this, because now you don't have to go to things to be entertained anymore. You can sit at home and be entertained in ways like that we can never imagine. We're like talking about us right now. But you're also being I talked to my religion and politics class about this yesterday. I go, you're all being discipled by something, and like Joe Rogan is probably doing more discipling than any pastor in America right now. Because those people who watch, I guarantee you, Joe Rogan's viewership is probably some of the lowest, like, social capital people in America. A lot of 30 and 40-year-old white dudes who are blue-collar factory workers feel left out, left behind, and lost. They're not getting those ties and those social capital strings. So they're being pushed by these people who they're seeing in popular media, but they don't have anyone in their real life to talk to talk to them about these issues and actually build community. And man, that sucks for democracy, right? From a democratic standpoint, little democratic standpoint, that's exactly the opposite of what you want. You want deep ties, strong ties, and they are not making any ties at all.
Mm-hmm. So if you look over, say, the 20th century to today, at these kind of the factors that show cultural resentment and anger and such, I know my natural intuition is to say part of what made them grow is, as especially white Americans, how much wealth you had to have think the American dream wasn't a farce has gone down. Mm-hmm. Basically since the late 70s, the possibilities the next generation has goes down. And so this cultural resentment and anger, and then the support and felt community experience in participation in civic, religious, social structures, and that you get in education, when the lower those are, then you not only feel like the American dream is a lie, but you then have to figure out where you're going to put your anger, right? And I think it's fascinating that the graph, like, then who is it that then said, I'm putting my anger, and I don't really go, but I'm really pissed off white Christians, and I'm down for Trump. Like, that's like, where did that anger get expressed?
I think it's because Trump said we don't like brown people.
Yeah.
I think he was able to scapegoat immigrants very well. And I think if you live in the rural part of America, you hear anti-immigrant stuff all the time. I mean, like, daily, if you talk to the right people, it's the Mexicans are coming, taking the jobs, and yada, yada, yada. And I think that's what Trump really hit on. He said what a lot of people say, like in the bar at 10 o'clock on a Friday night in a small town in America. It's the immigrants are the reason you're not making the money. He didn't want to talk about globalization. And the reason you're not making money is because a guy in China will do your job for a 10th of the pay and do it twice as fast. He won't say that because that's a hard problem to solve. The immigrants are an easy, quote unquote, problem to solve, is would drive all of them out.
Yeah, they scapegoat it.
Exactly right. They're an easy scapegoat because they're outsiders, and Americans have always been a little xenophobic. And so it just makes it even worse. Now, if everyone's doing better economically, you don't care about the immigrants because, like, well, hey, welcome to the party. I'm doing better. You're doing better. But we're the first generation in American history where, having a high school diploma actually makes you poorer than your parents and grandparents. And I think that's what people think, like we're always progressing, right? My generation's better than the next generation, and the next generation will be better than that. For a lot of people now in America, blue collar people, they're doing worse than their parents did at the same age, and they have no hope that their life is getting better, and they're going to be resentful because of that. Like that's justifiably resentful. It's just, how do you channel that in a way that's not completely destructive to American society? I think we're doing the opposite. I think we're channeling in a way that's actually incredibly caustic to American society, and I don't think there's an easy answer to that question.
Yeah. All right. Wouldn't this the follow-up to?
Yeah, this is like the threaded tweet, because people ask me about like that ceiling about the high education, high attendance people. And if you look at it, okay, so there's 71% GOP, right? 70% GOP. Why don't those people go to 80% or 85%? Like, there's room for them to go up. They're not going up, which is telling you they're rejecting what the current Republican Party's become. So I think that Trump actually put a hard ceiling on the votes he can get from educated white Christians, especially the ones that are actively engaged in politics and religion. I don't think the GOP can go any higher than 70, which means I think they can actually go lower in the future. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see, maybe weekly attending people with grad degrees go the other direction over the next 5 or 10 years, when you hear things like 6-week abortion bans. That's going to turn off a lot of these high education, high active evangelicals. They're like, hey, listen, I'm not down with all that stuff. So the party's going to become a party of uneducated cultural Christians, white people on the GOP, and the Democrats have a huge opportunity here, I think, to peel off some people in our generation, right? Kind of like the evangelical, college degree or above, people who would vote for Republican, but the Republican Party's got so freaking crazy about this stuff that the Democrats seem downright reasonable when you compare it to 6-week abortion bans and all the trans stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah. All right. I'm stopping myself from a rant that might derail us so that we don't talk for 2 hours. But graph or chart, not a graph. I don't know what the difference is, but
they're all the same.
Okay. Well, this is on religious tradition, like religious peoples who owns a gun.
Yeah.
And you said that there's no religious tradition in the U.S. where a majority of households own a gun. 46% of white evangelicals, LDS, are next at 41. Only 16% of Jewish households have a gun, and 7% of Hindus.
Mm-hmm. People are shocked by this, by the way.
Really?
Because of like, oh God, yeah. People think like everyone owns. If you live in rural America, you think everyone owns a gun. Like I bet you most of, I don't know. I mean, I bet at least half the households in my neighborhood own a gun at this point. But there's this idea called the Pareto principle, like the 80-20 rule. It's also called like 80% of your customers make 20% of your money and 20% make 80% of your money. Like 20% of Americans own 80% of the guns, except it's actually like way more extreme than that. Like there's these gun owners households own like 50 guns.
And I was about to say one of my family members owns about 3 for every member in our whole extended family.
Exactly. That is
definitely the last one I would want to own them. But
that's the way it always goes too, right? You're like, wow, which one would I not want to own guns? Let's give them all the guns. That'll end well. But I think that's the thing is we have to understand that most households in America don't own a gun. But the ones who do, even less than half of white evangelical households own a gun. I made it even bigger. The survey asked, do you own a gun, or does anyone in your household own a gun? So I made it even bigger than just, do you own a gun? Now, the pushback, which I think is a dumb pushback, is I wouldn't tell anyone on a survey I owned a gun. Seriously, dude?
Yeah, that's weird.
Like there are several people in the comments of this tweet right here who said, if I got asked this question on a survey, even though I own guns, I would say no. Like, are you that paranoid? Like, we intentionally anonymize this data in such a way where I could never in a million years figure out who you are. I think this data goes to state, congressional district maybe, but a congressional district, that's 500,000 people. So people are crazy paranoid on the gun side, but most people do not own guns. Most households in America don't have guns, but they play an outsized role in American political discourse. It's just the numbers thing. It's not everyone equals one in the political process. One person who sits around and shuts up and doesn't do anything doesn't count. But if one person writes a letter to their senator every day for 365 days, they're going to count for a lot more than one person. And these gun people are incredibly politically engaged and rattle the cages of senators and congressmen all the time.
Yeah. So Okay, ask me if these are good questions, right? Because I was looking at, when you sent these, I always think to myself, is this something he could even make a chart about, or is this just Tripp's ideology wanting to ask questions?
I'm writing these notes down right now,
all right.
Trip.
Well, what do we know? What percentage of guns, if you take the total number of guns in America, are in white American homes?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I bet if you did that, like my intuition is the graph would get really crazy. Because now this is just my experience, but I have a lot of Jewish friends. The few I know that have guns have a gun. My white evangelical family members and friends, and one of the neighbors who our kids aren't allowed to go in their house, they don't just have a gun. They got guns. They treat their gun cabinet is like an ark, and they come in by 2s and 4s, and they take every size and every kind. And so, because I think that would, like, that graph might be so different where then it would help show like maybe the marker is then it would be interesting to know why someone feels obligated, right, to go from 1 to 1,000,000 guns. And the other question I had was, is there data on is there data on a change in this? Like, do we know if this has been rather consistent for the last, say, 50 years, or if it's changed either in percentage or in volume? Because, and this is, I came back to North Carolina after being in, I moved to do my PhD in 2008, right before Obama won. And then, so I've been out of the South for 15 years. And so if I went, the individuals, the percentage of white evangelicals I know that own guns jumped, but the ones that did, that also own a ton of them, right? Like maybe before they had a hunting rifle and now they got tons, also jumped. And if we knew not just has the percentage changed, but the volume changed, then maybe you could point to moments like, oh, the election of Obama, or Black Lives Matter movement, or Occupy Wall Street, or COVID, like certain times that cultural anxiety triggers particular markers to go like, oh, Obama's elected. You know what I need? AR-15s. Or maybe the sunsetting of assault weapons ban, or a mass shooting, or any law passes. Like, I wonder if there's, if it's not just the percentage data, but the volume, if you can see if there are events that trigger it. So, sorry, that was not a pun on purpose.
Good. Stop using gun language, Trip. Like bullet points. I always use a conference when they go, stop using the word bullet points because it's gun culture. I had a guy in my church who ran a gun store. Actually, his wife ran a flower shop, and he ran a gun store, and they called it Guns and Roses, which is pretty good. You got to admit.
I have family members in Arkansas that have a pharmacy and a gun store called Thomerson's Guns and Drugs, and I have it's one of my favorite T-shirts to wear because people think it's a joke, and they're like, no, it's my uncle, and he wanted to print a T-shirt that said 2 solutions to the same problem, and his wife talked about it anyway.
I saw a Reddit picture that there was a donut shop and a gun store combined, which I thought that's pretty legit. Get you a Long John and an AR-15 all in one go. That's fun. That's a fun trip. But yeah, he talked to me a lot about guns. Like, he was like a far right NRA dude, and he left my church obviously because I'm not one of those guys. He said the best salesman he ever had was Barack Obama. Like Barack Obama, I go, that he's done nothing to, like limit gun sales. He goes, oh, I know that, but no one else seems to know that when they walk in the store. They're just worried about the possibility of, right? The possibility of us being restricted. And I think Democrats, the best thing that ever happened for the gun manufacturers, because the Republicans are great at making boogeymen. By the way, there's a great podcast series called No Compromise about the gun. These are gun rights people who think the NRA is too soft on gun rights. Like they think like God gave them the right to own a gun. That's what they say. It's a divine right. And it's a really good, it won like a Pulitzer, I think. And it is crazy as crap because you realize these people are fundamentalist about guns. Like, they think that's the most important thing in the entire world. And it's just amazing to me how the discourse in America, I was just thinking about the assault weapons ban passed, in 1994. And today it's like, you would never even get even close to an assault weapons ban passed in America. in 30 years, what happened? We didn't get more dangerous. We just got stupider, or more paranoid. And you got to think to yourself, why are we more paranoid? And the only answer I have is the media, right? Has made us more afraid of things around us when we shouldn't be. Like the dude who shot the black kid who knocked on his door, in where that was, Texas, no, Kansas City. 85-year-old black guy shoots through his glass door because he sees a black kid on his front step. That's his first inclination.
It wasn't the guy that shot him was an old white guy, right?
Yeah, 85-year-old white guy, like grandpa-looking white dude who probably his grandson said, well, he watches Fox News and all that kind of stuff, which, I mean, but like if your first inclination is there's a dude on my porch, I should get a gun, like that tells you, I mean, guns are not the problem. Guns are the problem, but paranoia is the bigger problem. Like
paranoia with a gun is
exactly like you put those things together and you get a kid getting shot for no reason at all.
Go back to sharing crazy memes.
Exactly. Yeah. Share your dumb Facebook crap. Doesn't hurt anybody. But when you shoot someone who steps on your front porch because you're afraid of them and they've not even like done anything to be threatening to you, we're in a dark place, man. Like this is a scary world we live in.
Yeah. Well, I mean that, and then like the Texas governor pardoning the guy.
Yeah. Before he got convicted, didn't he? He didn't get convicted, did he, or sentenced?
He hadn't gotten sentenced, but it was like, oh, I'm going to. You can't do it yet. He hadn't been sentenced. Well, I'm going to.
Oh, wait. Just wait.
You're like, just because the guy was talking to his friends on the internet about driving with his gun to a protest and hopefully taking someone down. That's just a normal gist. That's what we call locker room talk. And
I just think those paranoid people, here's why the internet's bad, because paranoid people find other paranoid people and it makes them feel normal. It used to be if you were like a gun nut, everyone goes, dude, you're a gun nut. You're a weirdo. And now you can go find 1,000 people online who are even nuttier about guns than you are. And you feel okay in that situation. It's validated extreme opinions, like those, like the Sandy Hook truth people, like the Alex Jones people. Without the internet, they would all be little isolated islands of crazy. Now they've hooked up and created like a crazy cabal that makes all those people feel justified and encouraged to, evangelize their craziness to all of us. And I think it's actually winning some people over. That's really, really scary for me.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It is scary. And, the guns are quite the, do you see a connection, or would there be able to test a connection between, between possession of a gun and American notions of private property?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because a lot of the early literature, like in the letters and stuff around what was the logic of the Second Amendment and these kinds of things, like why they wanted it protected was really early on about like actual threats, like, predators or going west, because they probably need to kill the people that actually lived here first, and all the keeping people you own in under control. Like they're not that those are, but all those things are connected to property. And then there are all these stand your ground laws or castle laws. Mm-hmm. They also have this property notion to it. And that was one of my other questions. I have no idea. This is what goes through Tripp's head when he looks at your charts. And
I just don't know how you ask about private property. You know what I mean? Like, what do you like? The problem is like these gun control questions are so nuanced. Like castle doctrine is not easy to describe to someone like in a, like a 2-sentence description. Stand your ground laws are like hard to describe because they're actually really nuanced. A lot of them about like what justifies and what does not justify shooting and that kind of stuff. Like if someone punches you then runs away, can you shoot them? Maybe. Like there's all kinds of, do you feel imminent threat kind of thing? So I think like those are great questions, but I think those are probably answered better through like qualitative interviews. Mm-hmm. Questions I want to ask gun control people or gun rights people, like NRA, far right people. I go, you say shall not be infringed. That's what the amendment says. Shall not be infringed. What do you not understand about shall not be infringed? So could a 12-year-old buy a gun? Are you cool with that? Because it says shall not be infringed. So that means that my 9-year-old should be able to buy a gun, right?
You might inspire them to pass a new law, Ryan.
Oh, God. Or like a convicted felon loses their ability to carry a gun. And I think all 50 states. Is that a shall not be infringed infringement? Like, isn't that like you know what I mean? Like that's a violation of your Second Amendment rights. Are they okay with that? Like, I don't understand. Like in Florida, you lose your right to vote, but are they okay with that? But you should not lose your right to own a gun if you're a felon. I think that's where a lot of Republicans would be in Florida right now is you can't vote, but you can own a gun if you were convicted of a felony. Which is weird. Like, that's a weird. I want to know the limits of the gun control debate, right? Like, I want to know how far these far right people on guns really are. Can I own a bazooka? Can I buy a rocket launcher? Can I have a low load nuclear weapon in my backyard? Because this shall not be infringed, right? This is what people don't understand. Every amendment to the Constitution has restrictions on it. The First Amendment absolutely does. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech. There's restrictions on every one. But on the Second Amendment, all of a sudden, there's a whole group of people say, no, there's no restrictions here. There's nothing you can do to stop this. And I just think that's such an unreasonable position to take that no one's ever really I've never seen really polling on that. Like, how far does this right go? And then I think it would actually expose what percentage of people in America have extreme opinions about guns and which are just kind of like on the right on guns, but not like unreasonably to the right on guns, right? Like concealed carry licenses, things like that. That's, that I think that's a reasonable position to have. You can conceal carry if you pass a class, aren't a felon, are 21 years old. But what about these states where it's like no concealed carry? You can buy a gun with no license, no FOID card, no training, no nothing, and take it to the range that day. Like, I want to see nuanced gun control questions which don't exist right now.
I don't know if nuance is really built for our cultural moment, Ryan. I would like nuance. Well, wrong time to be here.
Wrong time for that. And to go off on a little tangent here, like, in Florida, they passed a 6-week abortion ban, which is pretty darn far to the right. Like it's one step away from a total ban, which,
I mean, it's far enough to the right. What includes about 16% of the population actually think that's a good idea.
It's like 20% of people who want to ban abortion completely in this country. So it's like a fraction. But on the other side,
there are more that want a complete socialist takeover than want to ban abortion.
100%. More people are in favor of universal health care than banning abortion, like by a long shot.
That was in one of our chart sessions. It made me feel good on the inside.
I'll pat you on the head, comrade. It'll be fine.
I know.
But then on the other side of the abortion debate, you know what happened yesterday on Twitter? There was a whole hashtag called "Shout Your Abortion," which is people like saying like, "I had an abortion and I'm proud of it." And I'm like, guess what? People ain't there either, Chief. They're not for the 6-week abortion ban on the one side, and they're not. Most people think abortion should be stigmatized in this country. That's where the average American is. You don't win the debate against 6-week abortion ban by saying abortion's totally fine. We all should just get abortions. That is not how you win. What you say is they're crazy. The solution that you're crazy is not we're crazy too. The solution.
Are you sure?
Yes, 100%.
The number of times I will send private messages to friends with links to kind of basic social psychology and just go, I know you felt good and people that have the same deep held opinion as you retweeted this, but you're actually not going to persuade people. You're going to force people to believe against you harder. And, how do you feel about that?
You're losing. You're losing by doing that. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Look, I'm like, you gotta slowly lure them over to the right position. Like, I start hanging out with Ryan. Next thing you know, he joins a union and he's on strike.
Listen, I'm a dirty capitalist, dude. That's what that's all about. Nothing else. Pay me my money. That's what I want.
All right, here we go.
Oh God, this is a good one too.
So this chart looks at the share of people with great deal of confidence in different institutions. And since I couldn't figure out how to rework this graph, so it was like more like 5 a line versus 4. You want to tell people what those different things are? Because
the different generations, right? So I did, greatest generation, all the way from the boomers, Gen X, and millennials. And you can't do Gen Z yet because they're not old.
The generations of the different lines.
Yeah, the generations of different lines. And because the thought is like, is institutional trust like a generational thing where like older people are more trusting and younger people are less trust? Like, is that change now because of age and all that stuff? And the answer is that institutional trust has collapsed amongst basically every generation across almost every institution in American society, including, banks, corporations, Congress, Supreme Court, medicine, religion, you name it. And people have less trust in institutions today than they did 15, 20, 30 years ago. The only one that bucks that trend is the military. And confidence in the military has gone up dramatically over the last 40 years, except amongst millennials, and it's gone down just a little bit. I think that's because we went to fought in Iraq, and you boomers didn't go fight in Iraq, and we did.
Oh yeah,
and it screwed us
but
up.
also I think we believed what they told us, right? Like,
yeah.
After 9/11 and things, all the people older than us and stuff were like, "Oh, trust Colin Powell," and then Colin Powell's like, "Well, Dick Cheney wants me to show this graph about trains with secret weapons of mass destruction in it."
I feel so bad for him because he seemed like a really kind of like guy with a lot of integrity and got put in a terrible position saying something he didn't believe in. And he could have been president, I think, if he would have not been, peppered with that bad moment. But I think for a lot of these older people, it's because Vietnam's in the back seat right now. Like, Vietnam was an absolute debacle. And not only was it a debacle, it was a drafted debacle. Mm-hmm. Like, people went and fought there who did not want to fight. At least with Iraq and Afghanistan, people signed up. It was a volunteer military, not a drafted military. And a lot of people who died in Vietnam did not want to be there. They were there against their will. At least in Iraq and Afghanistan, the people who died there signed up. They chose that. And also, a lot fewer people died in Iraq and Afghanistan compared
Americans.
A couple thousand. Yeah, Americans, yes.
500,000 Iraqis.
Well, there's that. We're going to be greeted as liberators,
obviously,
and they're going to let us roll right on, and it's going to be fine. But in Vietnam, orders of magnitude more people, American soldiers, died in Vietnam compared to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think it's a different war in that way, right? All volunteer and a lot less casualties, but there was a lot more PTSD and people losing limbs and stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think it's why our generation is still like very sour on the military because of that. But everyone else is like, yay, military, which is like crazy. You don't trust Congress. You don't trust the courts. You don't trust labor unions. You don't trust, banks, but you trust the military more now than you did 30 years ago. It's just wild.
Especially since there's like growing examples of the military industrial complex purchasing politicians. Like the main funder of all three mainstream media outlets are big pharma and the military industrial complex. Like, well, that might be the best reason I could come up with why they have growing trust is because if you watch NPR all the way to Fox News and in between, big pharma and military industrial complex always have these groups funding it. And look, Lily's a drug foundation. They fund half of the research religion people do. Oh, no wonder they never call out big pharma. Anyway, so you're about to get me going. I'm dialing back. I didn't watch Morning Joe today, so I didn't start out as angry as normal.
Oh, you got to get fed your propaganda.
No, I watch Morning Joe just to know what Satan is doing. It's like wormwood. When anyway, see,
watch Fox and Friends in the morning. You got to do.
I don't get as upset about that. I like the stuff that's like really right wing. I just think, oh, that there's that. It's just when all these mainline Protestants that I know, or people that think they're like great because they have a rainbow flag on and tweet Morning Joe quotes. I'm like, can you think of like a bigger shill for corporatist Democrats in the military industrial complex? Oh, the dumb country lawyer now. See, I can't. I'm switching. Look, we got here's my question that came up to this that I think people would really benefit from is somebody spends time looking at all the kind of sociological data over time. Are there particular things that we know builds the kind of trust that is being degraded, or things that deteriorate it? When you think of the need or the deterioration currently, are there particular features that may not be obvious to us that when you're looking at the data and a stack of charts, or when you're writing one of your big books that kind of analyze it all, what builds or deteriorates the kind of social institutional trust?
Education. Like that is like the clearest, like that's the signal through the noise. And the thing about education is that's really difficult is we have what's called an endogeneity problem. An endogeneity problem is like the chicken and egg problem. You don't know what causes what. So in this case, like, does getting more education mean you're more trusting of other people, or being more trustful of other people means you're more likely to get a higher level of education, because you really gotta build these trust mechanisms in whenever you go to college, because you got to trust the professors, your roommate, the dean, the administrators, you got to have so much trust in people. And one of the reasons people don't make it through college is not because they don't have the academic firepower, it's they don't have the social skills, right? And build those bonds of like a trampoline to help them bounce off their worst moments. So, education to me is like the canary in the coal mine. People who are higher level education have higher level interpersonal trust, but they're also, and we've talked about this before, the people who are in church today in America are educated people, not uneducated people. The people who are most likely to attend church in America today are people with a 4-year college degree and make between $60,000 and $100,000 a year. So like kind of your solid upper middle, middle class, upper middle class white folks who go to like the Journey or the Edge or the River non-denominational church, like that is the kind of prototypical church going person now, because I think they realize the value in having a network like that, a social construct like that, where they can have someone help them with a project, or maybe a banker or a plumber or a lawyer or whatever it is. And that trust piece from the education piece is like a through line through their entire lives, and allows them to join other institutions, and their lives are richly better economically, spiritually, socially, in every way, because they trust other people. And so I think distrust breeds distrust. And I think that's really like we talk a lot about polarization. That's the polarization happening, is, do I trust other people or not?
Okay. I just thought of this one, but here would be my follow-up question. If you could test this, is there a way to check the impact of, if there's a difference between the impact of trust building for people that have an in-person education, post-high school education from community college all the way to 4-year degrees versus people that do online? Because I thought I'd noticed the difference between the experience of students just in lockdown, right? Even the kind of relationship you have with professors when they've met you before, they know that people they're meeting with now forced on a message board was different than those that always did it. But that might be something we could have data on to check, because personally, I regularly say things like the one of the biggest perks of an in-person 4-year degree is like learning to relate to a whole bunch of humans, learning how to navigate all that space, how to work stuff out with roommates, join clubs, and all these kinds of things that the capitalist logic of higher ed is like, let's give them the tools we need to make them good workers for our economy, but not the social relational skills that make them good citizens. And we will fund STEM, we'll fund online things and all this kind of stuff that don't, as if that is the main benefit, is the job and the income out of it. But if we have like actual data that just says, no, we will have a better America if we fund, especially people in low trust, low opportunity spaces, an in-person 4-year degree. They will have friends, they'll have networks, they'll have learned how to do these kinds of things. And in that whole process of what you have to do in person, you're actually addressing these features we all know are problems.
I think that's actually a great. We don't ask that question on surveys, like how did you get your degree, but we should. Was it hybrid? Was it all online? Was it traditional? We have an online graduate program at EIU for our master's degree, and we just did a capstone day, which is like the final project for a student. And he was telling me, like, he goes, the thing I missed about I didn't get in this online program is just the talk in between classes. Like you go to the professor's office and you just sit down and chat for 20 minutes. He goes, I learned more in those chats before and after class than I actually did in the classroom. And in online, you don't get any of that stuff.
Yep.
I agree, man. But the other thing is, when we went online, we added a whole bunch of students, and they got a master's degree they would not have had access to. So like where I'm at right now is, people ask me, is like an online degree better or worse? And I say at the graduate level, it's just different, right? It's just not the same for a master's degree. Now, I would never do a PhD online. That's the dumbest thing you can do. Period. Because getting a PhD is like, you've got to be ingratiated into the discipline of whatever you're studying. And there's so much culture and hidden curriculum stuff that you got to get mentored with by your professors and everything. But for undergrad, I am a hardcore, you got to do a traditional, most of your classes need to be face-to-face. You need to go to a classroom. You need to live on campus if you can afford it and, make those connections. I think you get a much better experience and much better bang for your buck by going to campus and being there for 4 years as you do to doing it online. But the problem with that is, though, I talk to my capstone students, my senior capstone. So my undergrad students are seniors. I go, should we have more undergraduate online classes? You know what they said? Yep.
Yeah, but
we should do more.
Yeah, but like asking a teenager what they want is not always great. Like what they're thinking of being able to invest as little time as possible and get the credentials because their parents told them the ultimate God they serve is the market, and you get a degree and now you can work things. But that's why I think the research question is so important, because there's a large number of people who if the investment in higher ed, which is now divided publicly because some people are like, oh, you're going to forgive their debts and not forgive ours, or we're going to fund these people to go here but not these other people. If higher education, like it is in most of the West, is a universal option for people, and there's a whole host of pathways where you get community, in-person relationship, and funding, then the investment in extending what accounts as public education is an investment in the integrity of our democracy. When you have to do a group critical thinking project in your required philosophy class with people you would never hang out with, you will be a better citizen, or you'll just learn that you've already failed at being human. Like it just is kind of weird to me. Now I get why a college student would say that, because they're like, well, if I only have to get up 2 days a week, then I can party later, and then I can get ChatGPT to help me fill out my message board things, and I can graduate. But anyway,
But you know what the bigger problem with this is? It's a third space problem. It used to be like first space is home, second space is work, third space. We used to have church as third space. Lots of people went to church. They met other people who are different than them in that third space.
Right after they all confess their sins together. That's my favorite. That's my favorite part of Christian worship.
Absolutely. Singing the doxology, saying the creed, doing the Lord's Prayer, like it makes you feel a sense of community. So you had a sense of like, we're on the same team. You might vote for someone different than me, but I still like you. I think you're a good parent, good person. When you get rid of the third space, something has to fill it in. And education can be in some, part of your life can be the third space. But even then we're moving that online. You know what I mean? It says like we're like on a deliberate path toward destroying the third space, actually destroying the second space for a lot of people too, if you think about it. Because if you work from home, you only have a first space now. You don't have a second space. We are not, I don't think we are designed to be that kind of, we are designed to be third space people. We need 3 different outlets. And it seems like we're destroying every one of those outlets as we go along. And this is what we've wrought. Like, this is the outcome of that, is a distrustful, paranoid, angry, intolerant group of people trying to function in a democracy that relies on compromise and diversity.
Yeah.
And we can't do that right
now. All right, we can go to the next one. I just thought of something Walter Brueggemann said. So if you follow this up, you can just use it because it brings you lots of Bible points, when you drop Walter Brueggemann's name. Is he talked about the vision of human community in the Hebrew scriptures is a place for your heart, right? So you have all these laws in Torah that are about like your home and the family, and it's not the nuclear family as we have it and all these kinds of things, but like the place where you were always known and are known, and then the place for your life, for supporting the life of the community, right? Which is all the ways they think about relating to the land and produce and space like that, all the way to laws about how you treat widows and orphans and these kinds of things. And Sabbath was God's declaration that there has to be a third space where you gather to have gratitude and receiving a blessing and guidance for how you direct your energies in the other spaces, your work in the home. And and he's like, that is what was the biggest difference when you get in the 10 Commandments? It's the insistence on Sabbath. How does that change the laws, if we function under pharaohs, build more bricks, do it harder, all these kinds of things. What was the gift of liberation is that it's actually a requirement for you to be faithful. Anyway, I think that it's wise, and I'm not sure that that Brueggemann was suggesting we put 10 commandments in all of the classrooms.
I got in so much trouble with a tweet about that yesterday.
What?
So much trouble.
I know that we'll have to do that next time because you wanted to just be like, look, I'm just reporting the data. I'm still a Baptist.
But they're like, yeah, but the church and state constitution says unconstitutional. I'm like, I know what the freaking Constitution says, you dummies. I'm just telling you what the data says.
You're like, I did not take the survey for everyone.
Yeah, people were like, criticizing me, like, oh, you collected your own data. What do you do? Talk to people coming out of church on Sunday? I'm like, you love me when I give you data you like. You try to, impugn my methods and my data when I give you data you don't like. This is the exact problem with America. Confirmation bias.
Well, if they want to know what we're referring to, they could go to graphsaboutreligion.com. This is amazing Substack, almost to its double digits.
Almost. I got, well, see, almost. I only got 9 subscribers. We're getting there.
What? Someone that's watching, if they should go do it right now and then get to double digits,
And we'll go, wah, wah. We'll do the wah, wah
I'll give you an air horn or a horn of Gondor if that's what their request is.
I love it. I love this graph too, by the way. I love this one.
All right. Well, so in this one, by your best guess, how would your current place of worship feel about homosexual behavior? In 2007, 64% of evangelicals said their current place of worship forbids it. In 2020, it had dropped to 34%. Mainline Protestants, it went from 47 to 18. For Catholics, 57 to 33. I think we call that the Biden bump. And Black Protestants barely budged, 22 to 19%.
Mm-hmm. Don't you think this is a fascinating question, Trip?
I do.
Because it's not about what you think about yourself, right? It's like speculate about the place where you go. Like, what do you perceive about your house of worship? I love questions like that because, like, I know it's all self-motivated, right? Like, we all have our own sort of biased perception of like what's going on, and you can like postulate about like what's forming these opinions and like how they're arriving at this answer. And so I get asked a lot about like homosexuality, like how the church changed on it, and like why are they not talking about it anymore, and all kind of that stuff. And here's what I think has happened. And I think this graph actually illustrates that point really well. Evangelicals, like in the 2000s and even the early 2010s, talked about same-sex marriage a bunch. Once a year, twice a year, you'd have a sermon about gay people being bad and homosexuality being a sin and all this kind of stuff. You know what they've done over the last 5 years? Just stop talking about it. That's what most pastors in most churches, those non-denominational churches we just talked about, the ones where all the upper middle class white people go to, what they've realized is most people in the pews are cool with same-sex marriage.
Yep.
Right? They might have a sister or a brother or a cousin or someone in their family who is gay and is married. And so therefore they realize they don't win anything by coming out hard on same-sex marriage in opposition. So what do they do instead? They just stop talking about it. And when you stop talking about it and making it like planting that seed in people's minds, year over year, month over month, they automatically slide more to what the culture is doing on the issue. So unless the church actively pushes back on certain things, I think that's where the culture kind of wins out. And I think that's what you're seeing in this data is you're seeing in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has not changed its position on same-sex marriage. Okay.
And Papa Francis is a little bit nicer.
Nicer. He said they're Christian, like they're good, they're
they
people.
Aren't necessarily going straight to hell.
Exactly. Wow. Really taking a big step to the left there, Francis. Appreciate that. But, evangelical position has not changed. The NAE position is exactly today what it was, 15 years ago. But how's it changed? How's it going from 64 to 34? I think it's because a lot of these pastors just said, let's not talk about it anymore. Let's find another cultural issue to talk about, whether it be, transgender or, drag shows or whatever else it is, because they know they lost the battle and they're acting strategically, knowing they're losing the battle to switch the battle lines and switch, what we talk about.
The saddest thing about that within evangelical spaces, and, it might just be because I've this podcast or whatever, but the number of times I get messages from LGBTQ people who are at a church where it's never talked about. Everyone knows they're gay or whatever and have been welcoming and stuff, but it's the moment they want to be in leadership or have their wedding with the pastor that's been their pastor for however many years, that then it becomes an issue, right? And so just because you see this change in things, and I don't think that justifies for leaders to be quiet. In fact, I find it it'd be a lot better if churches were real clear about what they actually thought, at least on their website or something, instead of waiting until people actually have friends and think they belong. And then the theology you're too ashamed to say from the pulpit ends up saying, no, we can't actually celebrate your wedding, or no, you can't actually teach Sunday school, and these kinds of things. Because part of even the shift in mainline things, I worked at a UCC church in LA during the whole Prop 8 process and such. We would regularly have people that are in joining the church, right, learning about the church to become members when they discover that the church is open and affirming. Like, I'm like, really? Because half the clergy are gay, but and we've had people like, oh no, I thought this was a Christian church, right? And so it actually took until the church was doing what it would normally do on protest things, that it was around Prop 8 and advocacy and such, that a whole host of a large church showed up. Like, unless you were invited to the person's wedding, you didn't know. And it wasn't like we were running around going like preaching at it as if it was an issue. I think most of the clergy just assumed everyone knows, and like when we say like everyone's welcome, no matter who you are, where you've been, and where you're going, we want to walk alongside you and invite Christ into it, or some cheesy heartfelt religion thing, like you're like, yeah, but and so that kind of question I find fascinating, because if you ask those same people, like, does your minister believe in penal substitutionary atonement? I bet you would get something similar for mainline Protestants would respond that way, even though their ministers most likely do not. They're like, no, but they never, it's not like the thing, they just never really talk about it. So then what the dominant cultural opinion is about how the cross works is daddy kills his kid and washed in the blood, forgiveness of sin, or whatever. And they just think that. I would regularly have kids, like, teenagers in confirmation, so they've only gone to this one church. And I'm sitting there going, you've been here. I know the other ministers. Like, I don't even think anyone at this church thinks anyone goes to hell. None of them believe in penal substitutionary atonement. But they just never talk about it. So, or the minister comes, they ask your minister, like, so when do you think the rapture is going to be? And you're like, huh? What? You've been listening to my sermons for how long?
You presuppose I believe in the rapture at this point?
Yeah.
Like, let's start with that problem. But you're right. I think that's the problem. Like, I think the problem is, though, that okay, so evangelicalism has gotten off this jag of like, let's talk about being a better father, being a better parent, being a better person, and not really get into the nuts and bolts of theology. And I think that kind of like idea has infected, even the main line has been infected by like the Joel Osteenification, and even Rick Warren to some extent too, by the way, of like being very surface level and not really like, you could say what Mark Driscoll is a terrible person. Okay. That dude talked about theology. But that dude talked about Reformed theology from the pulpit all the time. Like the nuts and bolts of what they believed. You don't see that in most churches in America. And again, the culture is the one that pushes. And in modern American culture, it's this like generic evangelicalism. And I think that's one of the reasons the main line sucks, is because it's not being able to create a religious distinctive to push back against that dominant narrative of like, we believe in Christus Victor here. Like we have a whole different understanding of the atonement than you do, but no one listens to it because I think the main line is really bad about portraying that. And also I think the media only picks up on like the left behind tribulation eschatology of abandonment that evangelicals believe in. So I think it's a both and problem, right? It's a wave crashing over, but the main line's not stood up and said, no, we're going to push back, and they've let the wave wash over them. But I think the criticism of the evangelicals is on homosexuality, you've let the wave crash over you. The cultural wave of it's cool to be gay has crashed over you because you've not pushed back against it. Now, do I think that's right or wrong? I don't know, but I'm just saying by you being silent, you're allowing something else to fill that void in. And I think that's where pastors talk about all the time in evangelical. Don't be discipled by the world. Well, guess what? They're being discipled by the world right now in opposition to what you believe.
What did you make of the fact that in the survey itself, it took the 20 years or so before mainline Protestants caught up to the black church? I sent that to a prominent black minister friend of mine, and I was like, hey, I think like why did it take so long for mainline Protestants to catch up with the black church? And he said, choir directors and organists. and I was like, oh, okay. And he said, no. He said he thinks it's just the experience of the black church has such a deep experience of social judgment and such. If you ask someone, how does any identity marker that leads to social judgment by the dominant culture, like, what do you think about them? Are they welcome here? Then the answer is just naturally going to be yes. It will take someone to think this is a theological non-negotiable to answer differently. And I was like, oh, okay.
So speaking of the black church, here's a crazy, I'm writing a post about black people and non-religion. Amongst white people who are nuns, 20% are atheists, 20% are agnostics, and 60% are nothing in particulars. Amongst black people who are nuns, 6% are atheists, 8% are agnostics, and 86% are nothing in particular. So when black people leave religion, they do not become atheists. Like that word in the black community is like radioactive to a level that is much different than the Hispanic community, the Asian community, and the white community in terms of what that word means. So even when they leave religion, they don't go that far. They don't go to the other end of the which I think is really an interesting cultural marker of like religion for them is different than it is for like the white community in how they understand the word atheist and how much stigma that attaches to it.
So that's something people might be able to find if they go over to crapsaboutReligion.com.
I haven't posted it yet. It's in the queue. I gotta proofread it, which I won't do.
Well, unless you get into double digits. All right. So I have someone beating on my door, so I'm gonna go check while you explain the next graph.
All right, put it up here and I'll talk for a
minute. This one's a fun one. And Jonathan Haidt, I'm sure, was excited about your assistance.
He didn't even retweet me. What a jerk.
What's his moral taste buds? Maybe he has the wrong one.
Okay, so Jonathan Haidt is this guy who talks a lot about liberals and conservatives and mental health. And so I was reading, he wrote this big, I think it was a Substack article where he showed that liberal young women have a much higher level of mental health problems than conservative women do. And so he was making this sort of like bigger claim about like political ideology and mental illness and anxiety and counseling and all this kind of stuff, saying there's like a problem with liberal people in America, a mental health problem with liberal people in America. And, there's a bunch of data in this Substack post that he wrote. And when I look through these, I always look for the data source and see if I can actually get a copy of that data. Because a lot of times data is privately held and you can't get any of it. So I wanted to go find public data. And it came to be that one of these data sets was from a Pew survey that I know was posted on a website I use all the time called ARDA, Association of Religion Data Archives. So I thought, well, he didn't talk about religion. I need to talk about religion. So I downloaded that data, the same data that he used. And the question is, has a doctor or other healthcare provider ever told you that you have a mental health condition? Now, obviously, there's some self-reporting bias in there because some people are just less likely to go see a mental health professional compared to other people, especially liberals are more likely than conservatives to do so. But I broke it down by ideology, political ideology, and then by religious attendance. And what you see is that liberals at every level of attendance are much more likely to say they've been diagnosed with a mental health condition compared to conservatives. Amongst never attending liberals, almost 30% of them say they've been diagnosed with a mental health condition. It's only 15% of conservatives, but it goes all the way down even amongst weekly attending liberals, 19% say they've been, amongst weekly plus, meaning more than once a week, 19% say they've been diagnosed with a condition, only 9% of conservatives. So, there's something going on here, and it might be a self-reporting thing. I'll be the first to admit it might be, but Lyman Stone did some other work with this and found that's probably not the whole story. That liberals and conservatives, liberals probably overreport a bit and conservatives underreport a bit, but that does not completely close the gap. There's something going on with liberal people that they're more likely to be mentally ill. But notice something else here. The more you go to church, the less likely you are to report mental illness. Now, obviously, the causal arrow is tough there, right? Is going to church make you less likely to be mentally ill, or being, not being mentally ill meaning like you're more likely to go to church? We don't know, but this is pretty strong evidence that, religious attendance is actually good for your mental health, which shouldn't be that shocking to anyone who understands social psychology and sociology, that organizations and groups on the whole make you feel better and increase your quality of life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's happening here.
And so the is there a way of checking the equivalent of going to a counselor or whatever for people where the communities are just resistant to mental health?
That's a harder thing to do, right? Because you got to figure out like how to measure access and things
Yeah.
like that. What Lyman Stone did, they asked other questions like about, have you felt anxious in the last, week or whatever it was? And what he found was that people who are anxious, Republicans and Democrats, or liberals and conservatives, are just as likely to report mental illness. So, if we both have the same level of anxiety, we're both likely to be mentally ill. So there's something there about saying maybe it's not all reporting bias. There's actually something going on here where liberals are just, and you got to think about it. Okay, so let's kind of step past that discussion and think about, like, pathologically, why would liberals be more likely to report mental illness? And I think one of the obvious answers is liberals catastrophize things. Like, it's like the end of the world is coming. Like with the environmental stuff, like, oh, we've hit the tipping point now and the world's going to fall off its axis and we're all going to drown in the ocean and all that stuff. That is probably not, I know your readers are like, this guy Ryan's full of crap. That's probably not going to happen, guys. Like, we're amazingly good at being resilient. We've survived whatever, how many years on this planet. We're going to survive this thing. But liberals, I'll give you a good example. The transgender thing, right? You heard all these people say, oh, if you pass this bill, it's going to lead to transgender genocide. That's catastrophizing things, right? Like, will it probably lead to some transgender people, taking their own life? Yeah. And that absolutely sucks. Is it going to be a genocide on a massive scale? No, it's not. That's the thing about liberals, is they always want to make things like seem Social Security, we're going to run out of money. No, we're not. We're going to be fine. Like, there's all these things that liberals do that make the world seem really scary. And I think that is part of the reason why they suffer from so much mental illness.
Is there a core, the tendency towards catastrophizing is one. What about regardless of whether it's true or not, but the psychological benefits of certainty?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think that there's a lot to, like, if you swim in unstable waters, ooh, man, your life is 10 times harder. Like, if you know what's right and wrong, I tell people all the time, and people they think I'm crazy. I said, I miss being an evangelical. Like, I miss the certainty I had when I was 17 years old, where I knew what right and wrong was. And there's a very clear definition of right and wrong. And there's like a whole community that supported me and all that stuff. Then you walk off the deep end and go to like a mainline church and you don't know anything. I wish I could go back to that. And I think that's the problem, is that conservatives think liberals could be like them if they wanted to. You can't unring the bell, man. Like once you swim in the pool of doubt and uncertainty, you can never step back on the firm foundation of I got it all figured out.
And you also think the people that can, you might wish you could go back, but you can't. But then you're like,
yep.
Are they even taking things seriously? What kind of naivete is here? And I always remember, I'm sure you've had this experience when you're in the classroom and you just realize that certain individuals, like, you're trying to, like, oh, I'm going to try to provide nuance and multiple perspectives and unpack this. It's a really complicated mystery. And you're really trying to come to a conclusion that might be slightly better than these other options and all that kind of stuff. And then there's like, nah, well, I just tithe, it's just what's in the Bible. And you're like, what do you, it's not really in the Bible like that. Like, and they're like, yeah, it's good. It's good. You just know you're helping other people, helping people out at your church. And then, like, if you're just like, nah, I'm not, I've always given, And then you're trying to complicate it, and then you realize they actually just volunteer more and give more than you, but they're shallow, from your perspective. You're really shallow. But did that guy that I was rolling my eyes out skip class for a week when there was a hurricane, and he is in college and tithes? Did any of the liberal Protestants tithe? If they skip, do I think that they're volunteering? And it's not just like that is an antidote, but it's the antidote that actually correlates to which community is more likely to give consistently of a higher percentage of their income and to volunteer more. And so it's, you're sitting there going, man, certainty is great.
Listen, there's way more money on the right of religion than there is on the left. Like orders of magnitude more money in conservative evangelicalism than in the mainline. New money especially. Like there's a lot of old mainline money, like old Episcopalian money from like the 1700s and stuff. There is a ton of like the Hobby Lobby people. Like that's on the right, dude. Like they funded the Museum of the Bible. Like there's so much, and it makes you want to go like, can I be that thing? Like could I twist myself in knots to be that? Because that's where I so wish I could go back. But I'm like you, Trip. I can't go back because I know too much now in my brain. But the problem I always, and I preached about this too, like actually last week, because last week's Doubting Thomas. You always preach Doubting Thomas on the Sunday after Easter. That's how the lectionary works, which I think is fantastic, by the way. Because you go from like up from the grave he arose and he's risen indeed and all this good stuff to I don't believe you.
Plus, visitors don't come back the next week. So they got to be members before you tell them, yeah, I'm not sure.
I call it Youth Pastor Sunday. It's Youth Pastor Sunday. So in my church, it's just me because I'm the only guy. But, I love that, like, the problem is with people who don't doubt is they'll never understand the people who do. And they'll always think you're less than because you do. I think that's such a caustic way to think about life. Like, why can't you believe what I believe? Because my mind doesn't work the same way your mind works, dude. I cannot see things black and white. And until people who have certainty, you never hear a pastor like say something with such certainty that you're like, wow, some people love that, but it scares the hell out of me.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. Like Driscoll did that to me all the time. Like I could see why people would be drawn to him. I wanted to like head for the hills when I heard that guy talk because I can't believe anything as much as he believes in that one thing. And I think that's what we don't understand about religion is there's got to be room for people who will never get to that Mark Driscoll level of certainty. And unfortunately, the modern church is basically you believe everything or you believe nothing. And there's nothing in between.
Well, and if you're at a place that it's hard for spaces that recognize the complexity of things to then make declarative statements about God.
Yes, because you're like, maybe you're wrong.
Yeah.
And you're like, maybe we are wrong.
Perhaps.
It makes it's like everything goes on shifting sand. And I think that's where you got a problem.
These were the follow-up ones.
Oh, the follow-ups.
Yeah. And I just realized I put them up here too. But two of the 4 follow-ups. Look, you send me one tweet with a graph, then you just got multiple graphs in your thread. And
I know.
Did Hate give you a retweet? No.
No. You know who gave me the retweet? The Daily Wire actually picked this up and ran this.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to send everyone over to this very cool new Substack.
Grassabout.religion.com.
All right, so tell me about these two.
So the one on the left is about the question is, are no religion people more likely to have mental health issues than religion people? And the answer is yes. Both liberals and conservatives who are non-religious are more likely to be diagnosed with mental health issues. Interesting. And then the question was, and by the way, this survey was done right during the height of the pandemic. Like I think it was like March or April of 2022 or 2020. So like right when, we were all locking down and, not going anywhere. And you can see like the people who are more likely to feel depressed are people who attend church less, liberal or conservative, feel lonely, pretty flat, but feel anxious, nervous, or on edge. You can clearly see the people who go to church the most are the least likely to say they feel anxious. So there's something about like, I don't want to sound like a freaking propagandist here. There's something about being part of an organization, religious or not, that you go to on a regular basis that seems to help your mental health. You can't look at this data and not say there's something here. You can't explain all of it away. There's a reason why religion has endured in society for thousands of years. It does something positive for us. And I think the data kind of points to that is mental health wise, you're probably better off being part of a social organization. And religion obviously is it should be, for my estimation, I think you should go to church, but I tell my students, I go, find a social group. Find a Lions or a Moose or an Elks or a bocce ball club or whatever it is. Meet on a regular basis and hang out and enjoy each other, because you're going to benefit from that socially, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, in all these ways.
A bocce ball club. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, man. I would join a bocce ball club. That'd be fun.
Hey, if you uploaded all of his data and stuff, I know that didn't he also track like the impact of social media use on different ages and like adolescent females have these patterns and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. I don't have the data he used for that part of the post. I don't have. The only data I had was that part so I had to like find the crumbs falling off Jonathan Haidt's, table or whatever and use that. By the way, Jonathan Haidt's, like, if you like, the biggest speakers bureau in America is called the Washington Speakers Bureau. If you Google religion for their speakers, he's the only one that they have who speaks about religion. Is Haidt. I think that's totally bullcrap, dude. Like, it's one of the most important topics in American life, and you have no one in the prominent speakers bureau who talks about religion.
Well, have you considered volunteering?
I'll volunteer as tribute.
All right.
Those guys can that's real money up there, boy. That's corporate stuff.
Yeah.
Like that ain't beer camp or strong drink camp.
Well, strong drink camp. Look, I might even cover more than your travel, Ryan.
Woo, buy me a few strong drinks at strong drink camp. Now we're talking.
I know. I don't think people understand how in-person events are not the easiest thing to actually make money on. Usually I just spend it all on beer and food and getting as many of my friends there as possible. So it's more fun. But that's because there are wonderful people that support homebrewed Christianity, becoming part of the homebrewed community and such. But my URL is only homebrewedcommunity.com. It's not as catchy as graphsaboutReligion.com.
You got to admit, that's a good
title. It is. You know what URL though was available? Because this summer, me and the Bible for Normal People podcast are doing adult VBS, and adultvbs.com was available. I now own it.
Really?
Yeah. So if you want to, June 30th, that weekend, have Adult Vacation Bible School. Me and Pete Enns are putting it together. John Dominique Crossan is going to come. We're going to have I think there's going to be like 7 or 8 different Bible scholars. We're going to have centers. We're going to have art time, craft time. I'm thinking of some what is like the progressive Christian version of silly songs with hand motions about adult themed Bible stories.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just saying. Adult.
It's gotta be about something like racial justice.
No, I'm talking about adult content Bible stories. Like, people call Elijah bald and he calls down she-bears and they maul the youth, or like that. Some of those dirty passages in Song of Songs where these 2 teenage lovers are like, "Whoa, I really like drinking from his fountain," and he's like, "I love dancing across your towers and frolicking like a deer on the fawn of your navel." And there's just quality biblical material.
Are there people who are experts in Song of Solomon, like written books about it and stuff?
Yeah.
Those people got to be weirdos, dude. Straight up weirdos.
Oh, I don't know. I might be that I like them, but I don't know if weird is probably an accurate description, but they are a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm sure they're a lot. But can you imagine devoting your entire life to understanding Song of Solomon?
One of my friends, their masters, did their masters on Song of Solomon, and she's also a graphic artist, and has made essentially, I think it's like the most biblical erotica comic book.
Smut.
It's like straight up cartoon erotica of Song of Songs.
Now that needs to be coloring pages from that at Adult VBS.
Oh, Ryan, I really feel some synergy happening right now.
Now we got an idea, buddy. Write that down.
That's what I'm talking about.
That is a great idea, dude. You sit around with a cable coloring like boobs and stuff from Song of Solomon with like verses across.
Can you put it on your refrigerator when you get home? And
it's biblical,
you're like,
dude.
it is biblical. Yeah.
You got to do this trip.
Look, it's not hard to sell me on this.
I think adult VBS is a great idea, by the way. Like, really good idea.
Well, you can come this summer. Then maybe you could learn about the Bible.
I don't know much about it.
Well, I bet you still have to preach every week. So, that's what happens when I know your church is a small American Baptist church, rural area. How did they decide you should preach?
Well, they didn't have many other options, buddy. That's really what it comes down. I mean, in my area, like, I could probably find a pulpit. I could find 3 pulpits every Sunday if I wanted to, because there's just such a lack of clergy. And I was cheap, A. B, I had another job, so they didn't have to worry about, like, health insurance for me or anything else. And I live locally, and actually I'm pretty, like, I'm a good speaker, like, dynamically and stuff like that. My content from preaching is not great. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm not a theologian. Wow. But I think I make up for it in presentation.
Do you use charts?
I would never No. Okay. But I do talk about social science sometimes. I'll be like, well, this is like, like, I'll talk about some studies, like the marshmallow study. There's all these different, like, things
like
you can
Chubby
talk about
Bunny?
social science. Yeah. No. It's
I was thinking VBS again.
Well, Walter Mischel was this, like, Stanford psychologist who did what's called the marshmallow test, where he brought, like, little kids in. There's a marshmallow and said, if you don't eat it in, like,
delayed
5 minutes, I'll come back and give you delayed gratification, right? So we talk about, like, being a Christian is really about delayed gratification, right? Because sometimes you pass up things that can be good now for what's going to be good in your future you and eternity. And, stuff like that. So I'll try to integrate stuff I'm reading with what we're talking about in the sermon.
But also Chubby Bunny. Chubby
Bunny killed somebody one time. Don't do Chubby Bunny.
That's what I've heard. But I've done it a bunch of times. I'm still here, So
that reminds me of people go, back in my day, we didn't have car seats and I turned out fine. It's because, the kids who didn't turn out fine are dead.
Yeah.
And they can't tell you.
Well, I mean, look, that's one of those times you just got to trust divine sovereignty.
Trust and believe.
But before you get done, so May 23rd, which is a Tuesday, we're going to do a homebrew teach-in with Ryan, because the new edition of his book, Nuns, N-O-N-E-S, is coming out. And it is regularly one of the topics I get messaged from clergy about all the time. Oh, who are the nuns? What are the nuns? What do you know about the nuns? Nuns. And I'm like, you want me to make sweeping statements based off mid-20th century, like, sociology that I remember from undergrad, connected with my intuitions of living on a beach in LA? Or you're going to go read Ryan's book? So, on the 23rd, that Tuesday afternoon, we're going to have a teach-in. There'll be two sessions in it. You'll get all sorts of, I'm guessing, charts and data and things.
You're getting all data, dude.
Yeah.
Straight graph.
And then plenty of time to interact with questions and stuff, and think about what does it mean. What is the first part is like on actually understanding the nuns, and then thinking about what is it like to engage and practice a religious wisdom tradition in that space. What are the needs that are there? What are the gifts we can bring? All that kind of stuff. So but you just finished the second edition and things, and be coming out then. What are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about doing, so the criticism I got for the first book is a lot of, like, atheists read it and go, hey, you're a pastor, you're just trying to teach people how to, like, win the nuns over. And then pastors like, I wish you would have given us more information about how to win the nuns back. So instead, I try to do both in the second edition, which is, like, give you more data about the nuns, like, in a neutrally objective way. And at the end, then give you more pastoral, like, care and ideas about how to win the nuns back. So I'm not picking a side. I'm going to give you both of the same thing. I did add a new chapter about COVID and what I think COVID did to American religion, which is actually probably a lot more fascinating than you would think it would be from, like, a methodological standpoint. Not much is the actual answer. And so there's a great discussion to be had about why pastors on the ground are telling me, they've seen, like, their pews are way emptier now than they were in 2020. But on the data, it doesn't look like things changed that much during COVID. So it's a kind of fun discussion about how there's a disconnect sometimes between what survey data says and what people are seeing on the ground. and how surveys work. So I actually think it's a really good chapter, like Staying Alone, about how to think about social science and like the limits of social science, like what we can't do well and what's impossible to do well. So more graphs too, tons more. I think there's probably like 50% more graphs in this book than the first edition.
Ooh.
It's 40 more pages long. Listen, when you talk about a topic on podcast for 2 years, you think about it a lot more. And you're like, well, I need to do more in this and think about more that. So almost every graph in the book's been updated with a lot more thoughts. If I had one graph in the first, I got two graphs now, whole new chapter, just a lot more content. I think it's a better book than the first book. And hopefully if it goes well, we get a third edition in a couple years, which will be better than the second edition, because this topic's evolving literally year by year. The things are changing, and also how we're thinking about it's changing as well as scholarship's getting better on the topic too.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And, I also know quite a few people have been asking about time to engage it. So what we're going to do, when this episode comes out on the podcast, I'll have a link where people can sign up, and you can come hang out with us. And if you can't join on that time, you can sign up, and then we'll send you the videos with, I'm sure plenty of cool graphs and the audio and such. So you don't have to come up, but it's more fun to be there and hang and send in your questions. So
we'll do it live. I went on Bill O'Reilly's show, and he was yelling at his producer before we went live. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, dude. He never learned anything. He's still yelling at producers. Loved it. I wanted to record it so bad.
What did you tell the New York Times this morning?
Actually, that interview moved to later today, so I haven't spoken to the reporter yet. And I'm speaking to NPR on Monday morning too.
What do they holler at you about? Like, do they have like specific things, or they're just like, hey, we just want to check in?
So the New York Times is going to write a series of stories on why people were leaving religion behind, and they want to talk to me because I'm kind of like the go-to guy on that now, I guess, apparently. And the NPR story is going to be about churches closing down and the impact that has on community, like just community groups and nonprofit and stuff like that. So, kind of the same stuff, religion, non-religion, the decline of religion and what it means. I just kind of use this opportunities to like drop ideas in reporters' heads about things they should be thinking about, and trying to help shape not just this story, but like the next story they write, especially for people who are interested in continuing this line of, work. I can kind of help guide them towards stories I think are newsworthy, and also the data backs them up. Because otherwise they chase these rabbit trails that are really not in the data. They hear one anecdote. Like, for instance, there was a story about traditional Catholics, like Catholics going back to Latin Mass. Like, it was like a big story in the New York Times, and it was written by Ruth Graham, who I love. No one knows how many traditional Catholics there are in America, though, and we don't know if it's growing or not. Oh. So are you really reporting on something that's happening, or something that's just interesting?
Well, their anger on Twitter is growing.
Oh my gosh. Tradcasts are like one of my least favorite like corners of Twitter. When I post a graph about Catholic attendance going down dramatically, you guarantee them those Tradcasts will go, well, pre-Vatican II, we were doing just fine. Now look at us now.
Because when you think of all the changes since Vatican II, the primary change is the language of the Mass.
Because they faced forward and not backwards, that led like 30 million Catholics to leave the pews every Sunday trip. Did you know that?
I mean, what is the... Like, when you think of all the other stories about the Catholics in the news, like, which can you even think of an embarrassing one where an institution uses its systemic power to cover up giant patterns of abuse? Like, why would? It's obviously the language of the Mass.
Listen, clergy sex abuse in one hand, Latin Mass in the other hand. I mean, which one weighs more, dude? Honestly.
Yeah. The integralist, though, like, I can't remember his name, the political philosopher at Notre Dame, but there's a number of them, the integralist Catholics, for their kind of political perspective, that is in the academy where the ugliest things come up. And also, like, a rather bad reading of Aquinas, but
yeah, I agree, Trip. Very bad reading of Aquinas. I've read all that. Summa Theologica.
I didn't say I read it on purpose. I read it for what's called qualifying exams, and but that just means I have a lot of people that read it for their job in my phone. So when I text them about it, they just start saying things, and I'm like, "Ooh, good. I agree with you. You wrote book on Aquinas.
Have you actually read City of God?
City of God, Augustine? Yes.
Okay,
I've taught a whole
I'm just
class on it.
asking. Oh my god!
Do you want me to get it off, and you can see how wrinkled the pages are? It's sitting over there. It was on my list of books I wanted to read when I finished my PhD. And so the year after I finished, I did a homebrewed thing that was called Epic Reads. And every month, I just picked a different book that I had to read selections of that's a classic. And then I would get a friend that's a specialist in it at the beginning of the month to do a lecture introducing the book. Then I would read it. And then at the end of the month, all the homebrewed members, the people that were in the homebrewed community, could join a Zoom. And me and Philip Clayton, who was my dissertation advisor, would both read it that month. And then we would kind of spend 3 hours going through the text and discussing it. And first two were, we did Plato's Republic and then City of God. It was wonderful.
Wow, why'd you pick such short books, Trip? Holy crap.
Well, they're the ones, if you do a hybrid philosophy and religion PhD, that everyone deals with, but you may not have actually read it closely. So I just spent the month reading those different books.
You know what I love about political science? Like most of our primary texts, like the Communist Manifesto is 110 pages. Fantastic.
Yeah, and who actually needs to read the Communist Manifesto when Jordan Peterson explained it all on a YouTube video once?
I do. I tell my students, you got to read The Prince and you got to read the Communist Manifesto. You got to read them. Like they make so much. They're different when you read them yourself, as opposed to interpreting through somebody else. Like it's a different. Plus, they're short.
I think you should read Das Kapital Volume 1. That was one of my favorite. I'd read lots of people that had read Marx, lots of Marxists and all this kind of stuff just in a philosophy process. And if you get into liberation theology and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And one summer in my PhD program, I'm like, one of my buddies, we're like, let's just read Capital Volume 1. And we got all the lecture series of David Harvey, a famous Marxist philosopher, his class at, I think, NYU or something. And we'd watch them and then read that section and then get together and talk about it. And by the end of the summer, that's when Tripp really, really parted ways with his with corporatist Democrats. I was like, this doesn't work. The next
so Marx radicalized.
Yeah, and I read that, and then you have to take interdisciplinary PhD seminars at Claremont, and I took one in econometrics, and everyone else, most of the people were
Wait a minute, you took a class in econometrics?
Yes.
Can you do stats?
I would say that I was familiar with how the process works, but not I was not good at it, Ryan.
So do you understand the logic of a regression analysis?
I learned all these formulas and then identifying variables and then how to use the computer program we used to do it. But they paired all of us. There are probably there are 20 people in the class. It was taught by Robert Klitgard, who used to run international development for the World Bank or something like that.
Oh God.
And he wrote books about this thing. And so 5 of us were not economy PhDs, and the other 15, 20 people in there were. So they would put us in groups, and there'd be one of us that weren't one in the group. So that's what I mean. I've been in a table where all the data is done, and I've been present with it, and I've said things. But if you asked me to reproduce it, I could look at it, and I think if I looked at my notes for a while, I could follow it. But I did not leave thinking, I'm glad I've mastered this. I regularly got frustrated that the questions I thought were most important, they're just uninterested in. I remember telling them, I'm like, well, has anyone all the text we were reading kind of assume gross national product is an actual helpful thing to monitor. There's a whole host of alternative metrics that they care for well-being more and things like this. And they're like, what? And I didn't know then that, that's the business school that ran it that's like connected to the Claremont Institute, and almost everyone there is like super conservative.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there like reading Das Kapital.
And I'm like, excuse me. They thought it was funny.
I like how you I sat in the same room as a regression analysis.
Yeah, I've been present for it. That's what I'd say. I don't want anyone to think.
Did everyone pass? Like all you religion folks pass that class?
No, I was the only religion or philosophy student. The others were PhDs in other things.
Okay, so like similar disciplines though, like to econometrics?
I think I was the only one in there that the last time they did math was when they took the GRE.
Who thought that was a good idea, Trip?
I did. I wanted to know what capitalists actually thought. And
that's not the class to learn.
But it was like,
man.
Oh, it says economy in it, man. And it fit in my schedule.
You should have taken like macro. Like that, you would have learned a lot more about capitalism and macro than that.
Well, all I needed was to go drinking with those economy PhDs. And then they say out loud when they're with their kind, like, remember when what's his name that ran for president, Utah senator? Romney.
Not
yeah, when he got caught off mic, like being like the 46% of the country that actually contributes and that kind of stuff. These people say that shit all the time. Like, if you wanted to make someone a Marxist, have someone that has rural poor white family hang out with econometrics PhD students. They think so little about the working poor and the environment and the impact of the economy on other countries that there's no chance I would trust them. It would be like going on a minister's retreat and realizing that every other minister there has moved a kitty toucher out of their congregation to protect them. That's how vile their care about the poor and the planet was. I'm like, if these are the people that win and get these, like, there's no reason they should be in charge of anything. They are not nice. They're just not nice. And then they would make fun of you if you asked a question, like thinking about like well-being or some of my follow-up questions, like to you, those are the ones I'd ask. Like, they go, like, so what if you check this way? Why would you do that? Like, how are you? What would you do if you found out, that like one of them was on like the investment in insurance and marketing for pharma. And so it's like actually a good thing for them to have an insurance thing where they can lie and pay people to start using medicines and not actually continue to produce the generics. And I'm like, yeah, but you know how many people don't have affordable insurance and they could get this cancer drug, but now they won't because we're not even making enough of it. And you're spending all this money for this other one and then forcing them to use it, even though we don't even know if it works better than the other one. And blah, blah. And they looked at me, they're like, what? Like, and I was like, more people don't die of cancer. The government spends less to help the poor not die. And they just looked at me like, what is your problem?
Is this a reality show? A religion student takes an econometrics class. Hilarity ensues.
Oh man, dude, the volume of, that's why I always tell people when I'll tell stories about that, when people are like, no, you don't understand. I think, most of the billionaires and people that are doing that really want the best for the world. And I'm like, I don't know. I know some of the guys that manage their money and they are shits. Like, you better hope there's no hell, like when.
Hey, they're richer than you and I.
I know. And one of them donates $50 a month to Homebrewed Christianity. He just never listens.
That's
He's like, it's just use mine to buy a drink, Trip. Don't use it for your propaganda. And
by the way, you know how many econ faculty walked the picket line?
How many?
1.
And do you think I'm surprised?
Oh no, they like I was like, we were sitting around like joking, like who was not on the picket line. All the English professors are like loud and proud on the picket line, obviously, and all the political scientists were too, because we collective action and stuff. But the freaking business faculty and the econ faculty totally crapped the bed on the strike. And you know what? They're still going to get the raise that we got, and they don't get docked the strike days that we got docked. So it's stupid. Free riders.
Oh, look, I understand. look, if you joined the union, you had your few strike days, and now you realize just how painful my econometrics class was. And
those guys didn't get no strike days. They just got the raise because they don't join the union. They just wait for me to walk the pavement for them.
Yeah, the two of the guys in the seminar, or the seminar that were in my group, were Brazilian, and now my thought, all I know about Brazil outside of my family had a sister church in Brazil, so we had people from our church go there, them come there, and that kind of thing. Which there's that, but reading about it is all the stuff I read via Brazilian liberation theologians. And
yeah,
so when they're like going on, and I'm like, but I said, why are you're sitting here, like, do you know the impact of the World Trade Organization on the poor in Brazil? Like, and do you know the number of malnourished children has gone up since y'all entered the global market space, with over 20% of your market being connected to multinational companies? And they would just look at me and go, we just want to be rich like y'all. And I was like, yeah, but what about your family and stuff? I'll give them money.
Nah.
And I'm just like, oh no, this is what we're exporting. If we're exporting that and prosperity Christianity, I'm like, oh, we're in trouble.
That's our chief export, dude. Reality shows, prosperity gospel, and the American dream.
Yeah. Well, I want you to know, this last 30 minutes of trip, this is our spicy banter. There you go, Ryan.
Wait, I thought we did 2 hours of spicy.
I know, but we leveled the spice up at the end because
I thought it was not very spicy. It was like white people tacos for a while, and so we had to hit the real habaneros at the end, and that's what this part is right here.
Well, I mean, you're the one with the red shirt on. I know, comrade.
Dude, I didn't talk about natalism today, so you should all have kids and get married and stuff.
Here we go. Anyway, we'll see you all May 23rd, when we have ourselves we have some time with the nuns.
It'd be fun. A lot of graphs. Hope you like graphs.
And if you don't come.
No, please come and still buy the book.
Okay, well, you can buy the book and give it to your friend that likes graphs.
I'll sign it if you see me. Promise.
Well, there you go. Peace out, friends. And remember,
bye, everybody.
Remember,
graphsaboutreligion.com.
Yes, make it data hardcore.